latest madness on yet another asylum seeker allowed to stay in this country under spurious grounds. Not an Albanian whose kids don't like Albanian chicken nuggets, not someone who's a paedophile who's his kids will lose out because he's not with them. This time it's a 32-year-old Iraqi Kurd, smuggled himself into Britain, not on the boats, but in the back of a lorry. That still happens on a grand scale. He's won his fight to stay here, despite telling officials he didn't have a reason, but he was going to make up a reason for seeking asylum. And he said that basically he claimed to have lost his Iraqi ID card and that sending him back, he said, would breach his human rights. This is crazy.
It is crazy. And I mean, it all goes back to the Human Rights Act, the European Convention of Human Rights, which has been put into our body of law and then effectively weaponized by our judiciary. If you need evidence of two-tier criminal justice, it's this. You know, the favouring of someone who actually turns up in court and says, I haven't really got a reason to be here, but please be nice to me.
So I'm going to lie. I mean, I'm joking, I'm going to lie.
I know, it's extraordinary. And you know what strikes me is that Western governments across the board are now hijacked by the sort of political philosophical ideology which underpins, for example, this case. But also it's the same political philosophical ideology about which you were talking to Jake just now. The inability for us to recognize who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. You know, if this was September 1939, we would now be saying, well, we don't really want to challenge Germany because, you know, people might die.
Yeah, if we bomb Dresden, then God knows what might happen. Yeah.
And, you know, Winston Churchill, under the International Criminal Court of Justice, would be a war criminal. And I think what's gone wrong, Julia, is that the primary purpose of government, which is the protection of its own people and its own country, has now been subjugated for the protection of every individual, no matter how awful they are.
And the idea also that everyone has the same rights, not just British citizens, but anyone around the world. You know, again, this all comes back to this idea, particularly on the left, that they don't really believe in the nation state. I think that's a bad thing. They like big. They want World Health Organization. They want the UN. They want the European Union. They think that they're much better at things rather than nation states. They don't really believe in borders, and hence we've got this problem. I mean, there's another story, front page of the Sun today, Send It Bark is the headline. But we've paid for, basically, for 4 months for an asylum seeker's dog to stay in this country in quarantine. We brought our dog back from living abroad. Costs an absolute fortune. He's a German Shepherd. He arrived in across the channel in a dinghy packed with migrants. It's believed to be the first case of its kind. He's a German Shepherd, so I'm assuming we could just send him back. His heritage, German, I don't know. But I mean, this is the madness. But you just know, and it's a point Claire made earlier, you just know that the migrant whose dog this was is going to be able to claim, well, I've got my dog here, so I've got family and life here under Article 8 of human rights legislation, so I get to stay. And that's the madness we're living with, because we're living under the authorities of people who don't really believe in the nation state and don't believe in Britain.
That is the root cause of all this evil. It's the root cause of everything. They don't believe in this country. They don't believe in civil society in the United Kingdom. They don't think that being a British citizen actually affords British citizens any kind of privilege or greater right than anyone else. As you say, it doesn't matter where you're from. Your rights are identical. Indeed, if you come to this country and you're from an ethnic minority, you are promoted. You get greater rights. You know, I'm reading forever things like iPads being handed out, free tickets to football matches to illegal migrants and so on. And actually, they should be all rounded up, put in a camp of tents, and then we should ditch the ECHR and deport them.
I don't even know. I've said to you wrong. I don't think ditching the ECHR is enough now. I think we have to basically go through our activist judges, because I think they are the problem. Their interpretation of the human rights legislation bears no relation to the actual legislation. If you read it, you don't have to be a lawyer to say that. Can I ask you also though about I want to talk a bit about British culture, because debate earlier on about what is British culture, and I was thinking, I said first answer, sense of fair play, and that's why British people. It's not fair play. But I want to ask you also about this plan for this youth mobility scheme. They're going to rename it as something else, like a work experience scheme or something. Basically, it's going to be young Europeans, there are millions and tens of millions of them, coming over here, being able to work and live here under this scheme. The cap, we're told now, would be around 100,000 if it does go ahead, which certainly Keir Starmer wants it to do. But the EU want those people to be allowed to bring their own families with them. What do you make of that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it goes again back to what you were saying, that those who govern us don't believe in the nation state. And Keir Starmer last week was talking about the importance of controlling immigration. And
Yeah.
here he is a few days later
Yeah.
taking our borders down. I mean, it's absolutely absurd. And anyone that wishes to be governed from Brussels, that wishes to enmesh the United Kingdom in the supranational institutions that basically undemocratic, is someone that is essentially anti-British. And so I can't help but conclude, Julia, that Keir Starmer and his ilk, these kind of rabid Europhilia, that they
Yeah.
suffer from Europhilia. They are basically
But they
anti-British, and
are, they
they
don't, but they think that British people are, far right and bigoted and ignorant. Again, fooled by words on the side of a bus. And we can't be trusted with making the decisions ourselves.
Yeah, and so, we've got to row this all back. We need a complete restoration of our constitutional framework. And we need to then, as you rightly say, it's not just sufficient to change the law. What we've now got to do is go through our civil service, go through the judiciary, the police, the other institutions, where we need to absolutely get rid of all these people who stand against the nation state. And you talked about British culture.
Yeah,
The
very
other big
briefly.
damage, very brief, the other big damage by codifying human rights and that sort of thing is to set aside British culture. It's for us to it's to force us to forget what it means to be British.
Yeah, absolutely. Ben, really appreciate you joining us, Ben.